All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Skinner, and I have with me my friends Justin and Paul Haefner. And I will let you guys introduce yourselves and explain what you do. So you can explain it better than me.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
We're still trying to
that's
figure
a
that out.
trap. He really is trying to fight with us.
I'm
Um,
ready for a good fight.
you want to start with where this business started?
Well, so we've been trying to find a shorthand for this for a long time. I'm a psychologist, a clinical psychologist by training, and had a psychotherapy practice for years, but I grew up a horse nut. And because of that, I spent a long time ago, trying to figure out how to put my passion for horses together with my professional training. And I came up with two ideas: equine assisted psychotherapy work and sports psychology work with riders. And I've been doing that since I think 98 was when I started doing that stuff. And then when Justin turned 18 and said that he wanted to train horses,
We found out quickly that I think I was 16 when this
when you
started. We found out very quickly that insurance companies don't want to insure a 16-year-old kid working self-employed training horses.
Bye.
yeah.
Uh, and so we joined forces originally just for insurance reasons so that I could come into riding far and be able to be insured. And then it was around 2018 that we were riding together on a somewhat daily basis, and it was just we were talking a lot about all the things that we were working on with people and with horses, and realized that it's like, hey, we could really do something together with this stuff.
Mhm.
And then we put together, I think it was we did like an hour-long demonstration at the barn we were working out of, and about our concept of working with the horse and rider from a psychological perspective together. And that's where everything we do now is born. And what we do now is that we have the psychotherapy practice that includes sports psychology, clinical psychotherapy, and consultation services.
Yeah, mentorship,
Yeah,
personal development, coaching, all that kind of stuff.
right. And then
Right.
my side of the business is the horse. We're at our home farm right now. We have an office in Winchester, Virginia, and then here in Charlestown, West Virginia, we have a new property that we have training horses, teach lessons, and all of that. And then we come together to teach courses and clinics,
Mhm.
which really blend. We have a clinic series on fear and anxiety for horses and riders, and we teach general kind of horsemanship and sports psychology based clinics, as well as some newer courses that we're teaching for riding instructors, to help them understand their students' emotions, and as well as give.
Understand why people are crazy.
Right, exactly.
That was going to be my first question. I actually have written it. Why are horse people so crazy? I need a definitive answer to solve this. When I
Yeah,
started my
how long
horse
did you
training,
have?
yeah, well, we vetted this down fast forward. When I started horse training, this was a foreshadowing of what the career for me was going to be like. We were standing around talking to a bunch of friends, and we were all talking about like how crazy horse people were. And the craziest person that I've ever met in my entire life walked up, and she said, "Well, I'm not crazy." And that was it. That was just like all you need to know. I looked at her like I thought it was going to be a joke, and I was like, "Wow, you're like certifiable." You know?
Oh,
So so talk me through the fear and anxiety thing, because that's a really common one. What's your typical approach on dealing with riders with fear and anxiety on the riders side?
yeah. Well, what's interesting actually is that it's actually not much different working with the riders than it is with the horses,
Okay.
right? So one of the things we do is we ground everything that we do in what we understand right now about how our nervous system functions. And, we won't go, well, see, his eyes will glaze over if I start walking down that road too far. But, one of the things that we know is, and this is if the whole, One of the things we know, this is the whole polyvagal theory that's
Yeah.
so popular out now, is that social connection systems in our nervous system are is a part of our brains that help us regulate. So the first thing that we talk about is we help people understand what are the things that are going to help them regulate, right? And, one of the things that's going to help them regulate is being in a positive connection with whoever it is that they're working with. And you see this all the time. You have like someone will come up and with one trainer, if they don't feel safe with them,
Mm.
they're not going to be able to regulate themselves, right? And we have had clients who range from I'm just nervous, or they're recovering from an accident, or they have a lifelong history of complex trauma. But if we can create an atmosphere where they, what are all the, we can throw out all the cliches, where they feel seen and heard and understood, and they feel connected, and they feel safe enough in that environment. It doesn't mean that everything's ducky at that point,
Mhm.
but it's their best shot of doing that. And the horses have the same nervous system structures. So when we talk about, helping an anxious horse, it's about building that connection. And you can call it anything that you want. You can call it attunement, you can call it, connection, you can call it building relationship. But those things are always where we start. And then you get into I would just say, then after that, you get into like the tools and the
Right.
tricks of the trade and the strategies and things like that. We just did our clinic last weekend was all focused on practical tools. So that's what's going to be most on my mind. So with people, the practical tools are, helping them. We call it about, mental fitness. It's about committing to the underlying things that will help them regulate themselves. And one strategy which we go to over and over is what's called point focused mindfulness meditation, just because it helps us kind of work out in a way that builds strength in our ability to direct our attention, our ability to be aware of and tolerate our emotional experience without reacting or responding. And in light of that, it also helps us practice letting go of that stuff, because usually where things go south is when people get caught up in a spiral. Um,
Okay.
so we do that, and then we teach breathing techniques. We teach ways of using personal resources. Some of that is from the world of, people would know it from the world of neurolinguistic programming, or what's called Ericksonian hypnosis. Um, I, and I guess the way that I describe it, it's kind of hard to put it in a nutshell, because I saw my first client in 1987. So, and I've been learning ever since. So I have this toolbox with all these different tools in it. And then what we want to do is be able to pull from that toolbox for something that's appropriate for that individual.
So at what point does the lobotomy come onto the table?
Well, the funny thing is it never, you don't have to go there,
Oh, you
which
don't?
is
You don't?
maybe
I don't think
my
Justin agrees with
lobotomy.
Yeah, we might need to talk about
Maybe
a little.
mine. No, it's like this, of course, I'm going to say this and meet someone next week, but I've worked with all kinds of riders who are absolutely terrified,
Yeah.
and it's never about getting on their horse. Let's just take that. And it's never taken me more than 35, 40 minutes to get them in the saddle
That's
In a way
awesome.
that they feel good
in a
about.
way that they feel
Yeah.
good, in a way
Yeah.
that they feel comfortable.
But you're not like chaining them like I do.
No.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
until you see the pulley system we have in the
That's what I
indoor.
was gonna say. I mean, I can do
Right.
it a lot faster than that, but
Right,
can kind of
right.
rotator cuff
Mhm.
and go.
Right, if you pull them up to the rafters and then put the horse underneath and then cut the
Right.
line,
Yeah.
then that gets
It's,
them in the saddle.
it's energy
Right.
intensive,
Right.
and they do scream
Yeah.
with duct tape.
Right, 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 right.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
So
um, s-
Go ahead.
And the only other thing I would say about that is that the thing that there's been a lot of discussion in the community about the behavioral approach of CAT H,
Yeah.
and God, I have no idea what the acronym stands for, but
Okay.
it's a refined type of approach and retreat. I guess is probably an
Yeah.
oversimplification. We do the same thing with people, and we teach them how to do that for themselves
Mhm.
that we do with the horses, and it's powerfully effective
Right.
and super helpful to people.
Yeah,
That's
and
really,
then sorry.
I was just gonna say it's
Um,
neat.
oh,
Go
it's
ahead.
neat. That's what you. Sorry.
Two
Um,
thumbs up.
there's a couple frameworks that we think about that are very helpful to the the thresholds are a big deal. So, a lot of it's very popularized to step out of your comfort zone, get comfortable, getting uncomfortable, that kind of idea. And it's not that we disagree with that, but it's more nuanced.
Yeah.
So, so we talk about two thresholds. There's the comfort zone, and then, and I won't go into the neurology of it because I don't understand the neurology of it.
I can.
Yeah. And then I'll stomp
I
on
will.
his feet when he starts going down that. Um, but there you go. Yeah. I was trying to get my cat off the counter the other day using one of the hair
It's a
ties.
very effective behavioral modification tool.
Right, yes. Um, but there's a point where our nervous system detects a threat. And same with the horses. There's that moment of, attention up, uh, a little bit peaked activation where the body goes from safety and comfort to the edge of discomfort where they're detecting a threat. And then there's a second threshold beyond that that leads to panic or dysregulation. So the area in between these two thresholds we call the window of not we, I mean,
Right. It's from the
yeah.
trauma world. They call it the window of tolerance.
And
Mhm.
and the place where the growth happens that everybody's talking about and looking for is within the window of tolerance. So it's not as simple as just throw yourself out of your comfort zone because there's another line there. And
Mhm.
if you're beyond that second threshold into panic, there's no learning potential. So there's that point we have to bring the activation levels down so that we're at least within that
Mhm.
window of tolerance.
Mhm.
And then where I think things get really tricky for both people and horses is when that window of tolerance is super small.
Yeah.
Because it's like that moment that things get uncomfortable and then leads to panic very quickly, and there's very little room to help them in that situation. That's where our focus goes to helping grow the window of tolerance. And that's been super, super powerful for me working with horses to think about that way. Um, and I've heard some mentors of mine who rode with Ray Hunt would talk about how he would say we're looking to ride the edge of trouble is how he would. And then Tom Curtin, who I ride with out in Oklahoma, talks about this is all language, but he talks about it's okay for a horse to be a little concerned, but it's not okay for them to be bothered. And so the way I start to filter these things is that concern is within the window of tolerance, bothered is beyond the second threshold. And that idea of riding that edge of trouble is the closer we can operate and push that window of tolerance toward the second threshold without crossing it, the greater growth potential we have. So
Right.
that
And the window grows
right.
from that activity. Yeah.
Right. So that's that kind of idea of riding that edge of trouble almost
Mhm.
and this is where I think things get interesting with the way people work with their horses, especially when we're looking at things from very much of the relational perspective. And when we're seeking, we taught this last clinic, we talked about releasing tension primarily. And where that goes is like when we talk about relaxation and releasing tension, then it's like how relaxed can they get? And it's the whole system is almost depressed at that point. And the horse, it's like they go to this, I talked about the pothead on the couch kind of eating potato
Yeah.
chips relaxation versus an activated and this goes back to the polyvagal theory, but being able to be activated with energy and be operating without tension.
With relaxation, right?
Right. So that's where I think some people get really stuck because they're seeing that first threshold where a threat is detected in their horses. They're seeing that as the line they shall not cross.
Yeah, I think that's a really big danger right now in the horse world is that everybody
Hmm.
is afraid in a well-meaning way. They're so afraid to create any tension that they
Right.
Hmm.
actually reducing the window of tolerance to the point that the horses are becoming more and more
Mhm.
neurotic and more.
And reducing the comfort zone
Yeah.
Right,
in
making it
because
smaller and smaller.
that's the real threat. The world becomes a very small place
Mhm.
Yeah.
when we operate that way.
And people are the same way. I mean, that's fundamentally the disorder of agoraphobia, is people
Yeah.
make their lives smaller and smaller and smaller until they can't like even step out of their front door,
Yeah.
right? And and the other way to think about it, which I think is helpful, is that everything is stressful.
Mhm.
Like breathing is stressful. It's physically stressful to do that. Any activation involves stresses, but we don't stress about our, working out or our challenging ourselves to engage in a learning activity or things like that. And there has to be a way to understand it for people and for the horses, where we can engage in the world in a vital way
Mhm.
Yeah.
without crossing a line into something, whatever language you want to use, that's at very least unhelpful, and at the very worst, maybe harmful or hurtful, right? Got to be a way to do that.
Seems like you would probably know that way.
No, I
So
think that's
typically, go ahead. Sorry.
no, we meet every Monday
Okay.
on Facebook Live, and we talk. And we talk without any other help for an hour every Monday. So if we end up if we end up talking over you, it's because we're really used to sitting right here and just talking, right?
I'm the fourth of seven kids, so I always have a like compulsive need to be heard too. So like, shut up and let me talk. No, I'm just kidding.
Uh,
So what I was going to ask you is walk me through relationship because that's another big thing where what I get a lot of times because I do a lot of postural stuff. So like the crying people is not my department. I always send them to somebody qualified, right? Because like I'm certifiable on my own. That's not my department, right? It's the blind people blind. Um, but when it comes to relationship, what I often get from my students is they're like, well, I can't start anything because I'm working on my relationship. We don't have a good relationship, so therefore we cannot do anything until the
Yeah.
relationship starts. And I'm not the expert on this. Obviously, I'm a divorced person, so I'm not somebody who this anyway. But like from my perspective, relationship develops through shared experiences, right? Good and bad,
Mhm.
and getting through
I'll
them.
tell her our
So
new quote.
walk me through your perspective on relationship, what that means, and how you
What?
develop it.
So we presented at I think I told you we were down at this EAL Equine Assisted Learning Summit in Roanoke the other week. Um, and we met Tim and Tanner Job. Oh, I said I was really excited about this. I was trying to tell everybody about this. I Tim started the Natural Lifemanship organization, and I don't even know the extent.
They do equine assisted therapy and equine assisted
Yeah.
learning. They specialize in working with people with trauma.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is our new favorite quote on relationships, and that's that relationships are built on repair, not perfection. And the idea of working on your relationship without doing something is I think gets a little tricky. Um,
So I want to let me reframe it.
yeah.
You are never not in relationship
Oh, hey,
with
I gave
everything.
that lecture. That's why I recognize those words. I said that. Yeah, right.
Right. So if you're going to if you're asking your horse, right, to move their shoulder or to back up, or you're just sitting there out in the field, you're in some kind of a relationship,
Mhm.
right?
You're
And
in relation to them. You're by definition
yeah.
in relationship.
And if you know you're fighting, you're in a relationship. I mean, it's really not about from that perspective, it's not about getting into a relationship, it's about growing or developing the kind of relationship that you want.
So how do
And
you do it?
well, part of it is you engage,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I think
And go ahead.
that it's like it's I mean, I've got my goals and my plan and all that stuff that most of the time doesn't go the way I hope anyway. But it's like, well, I'm going to back up even more. So one of the ideas that's been really fun to play with, it comes from it's nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And what's the quote that you can't
There
connect
is
to him?
no conflict on the level of need. All conflict exists on the level of strategy that people choose to meet their needs.
Right.
And that if you have a conflict, it's only a crisis of creativity.
Hmm.
So it's so like a really interesting way to look at this is that our horses have needs and we have needs. And because we're trying to help our horses meet their needs does not mean we need to set aside our needs or vice versa. Because the reality is if we're trying to like I can see my horse outside right now. If I want to meet his needs, I will not go and halter him later and try to go and work if I just want to meet his needs. But I have a need to go and work with that horse and ride that horse and whatever the hell it is that we do and progress. And those are my needs. So then it's a question of the creativity and the strategy behind how are we going to go and meet both of our needs. Um, I think, in terms of when we're talking about building like this positive, healthy relationship, it's like Paul said, we're that's the thing is everybody's like looking for we're looking for that relationship. Well, you have one, you might just be shit. So how are we going to build a
Mhm.
positive relationship with our horse? And then it's a matter of, am I able to connect with my horse's attention? Do they see me? Can they regulate that attention? Can they connect with themselves in the sense of can they balance their internal versus external awareness and focus? And so it's like from that beginning place of can we operate in the same space and be connected to each other in the sense, I'm not trying to use these big broad words, in the sense of, you have our attention right now, and we have your attention right now. We're connected in that way.
Yeah.
Um, I think unless you're like texting somebody on the side, like, look at these idiots, but but
I'm
and
actually
then
watching a movie.
what?
I'm actually watching a movie right now.
Perfect, right. And then it's when we're operating on that from that standpoint of we can share focus on one another and attend to each other and then can we go ahead and it's just a matter of can we move through space and time together and can we do that in a positive way? And this I think about a lot of different pieces from folks that I've been able to ride with. Can I provide a feel that's worth my horse following? Can I feel for my horse? Can they feel for me? Is that like that? And I try to play with those ideas through the work we do. But that's something that came up in our clinic is, I'm doing the exercise you told me, and she doesn't like it.
Mm.
And it's and then it's like it's not about the exercise. It's about how we're relating to our horse, how we're presenting it, are we grounded? Do we have intention? Are we clear? Are we present? Are we aware? Is our timing good enough? It's like there's all these other pieces, and I think that focus gets so put on what
Yeah.
we're doing, not how we're doing it. And that's where it's like, that's why I like riding with real cowboys, like I will never be, because it's like they have a job to do,
Yeah.
an actual job to do. We have to go doctor to calves. How do you take your horse along with you in a way that they feel good about that job? And it's not if I don't have a good relationship today, I'm just going to hang out in the round pen with them while the calf's bleeding out or whatever's going
Right.
on. So,
That's
So
what I was gonna go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go first.
Well, I was just gonna say, this is probably anthropomorphic of me, but what I see is a lot of people hanging out and gazing at their horse and like,
Hmm.
someday he'll love
Right,
me if I just spend time with him. And this is
right.
where the anthropomorphic thing comes in probably. But if somebody was just looking at me all day long while I was eating and trying to do my shit, I would be so like, you don't add anything and I'm going to kick you in the teeth if you don't get out, right? I've actually had a couple male interests that did that to me. And I was like, I cannot even tolerate the sight of you because you contribute absolutely nothing. You're just always there whenever I
Right.
turn around, right? Bothering me.
Hmm. Right.
So to me, a relationship has to give me something I don't already have alone because I'm not a very
Hmm.
social person. I like being alone a lot. So you guys are on
Hmm.
here because I enjoy what you add, right? We have a relationship
Hmm.
based on something that you have of interest, not in a
Hmm.
manipulative way, but like
Right.
when
yeah.
we're working with our horses, when we think of relationship, isn't there some need to contribute to that horse's well-being in a way that they can't
But
get?
and I was gonna say something really similar. So when someone says I like to work on my relationship first, I would ask them, well, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you know and how do you get it? And then I would say, how do you build relationships in the world with people?
By being
Mhm.
in front of
Right?
the drawer, I need to open every time.
And it's, so one is I'm not particularly bothered most of the time by anthropomorphism because that's the only way we understand the world is through our lens. So I get that. But you're absolutely right. It's like a relationship, it is by necessity, the relationship involves interaction.
Mhm.
Mm.
And if the interaction is staring lovingly, waiting for my horse to stare lovingly back at me,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't mean that non-demanding time isn't helpful and important, right? I mean, if we had a partner who is, added value all the time, 24/7, right? It's like you want to launch them as well, right?
Yeah.
So you want them to add something to the equation, and then every once in a while you just want to parallel play and just kind of be in that space and do your own thing. And I think, I don't know, I don't pretend to know what's in a horse's consciousness and what they need, but I do know that, that relationships are born of interaction.
Mm,
And that's one kind of relationship, that your horse tolerates you sitting there staring at them.
right.
Okay. But if you are interested in riding, you have to have a whole different kind of relationship. And it doesn't mean that you don't attend to the horse's needs, right? But you have to come up with a way to communicate. We talked about this all the time. It's one of our other frameworks is complex systems and complex systems theory.
That's what they are. They go like
Yeah,
this.
they go like this.
I was on the other way. I get confused. This is probably the problem is I don't understand clockwise and counterclockwise. That's probably why relationships are just hard for me.
That's a complex system. Yeah.
So you've got you, right? And how many parts are there to you, right? And even if you just break it down, there's organ systems and there's, emotions and there's thought and there's
And all
sensory
those
systems,
personalities.
personalities, you got all these different things. And then a horse has got all that going on too, right? They have their own deal. And then you're trying to put this together into one big system. Well, the only way those complex systems work is if there's the phrase is an open flow of energy and information between all the different parts of the system. And the biggest block for people and the biggest block for the horses is the communicating between the horse and the rider.
Hmm.
And figuring out how do I open, I mean, information is exchanged through energy. How do I open up a channel of energy and information that then gets received in a way that it's meaningful, right? And this is all about training,
Yeah, and we
right?
see, so what happens when there is a blockage of energy and information is one of two things, either chaos or rigidity. And we can,
Right.
anything that happens, any of the problems that people bring me with their horses, I can put them in one of those buckets. Um, and it's all a matter of how do we open up the flow
Right.
through those places that are stuck.
Hmm.
And that could be, we see that in a physical sense. It's like that's where body work is really important, is that there might be these blockages of energy and information through the body of the horse or the rider. But a lot of times it's a matter of communication is huge, super highway of energy,
Right.
is what we are doing. And that's the other thing, is we're always saying something to our horses. It's just a matter of it doesn't mean anything, or does it
Right.
mean something, what we
Right.
intend is really the question.
Right. It's a signal to noise ratio, right?
Right.
And that's so we're walking around "Ah," all the time, right? And what out of that,
That's the technical term
you
too.
know, what out of that is a horse supposed to be meaningful? And you
Yeah.
and you know, and I'm not picking on learners. I'm the same way as a learner. Someone shows you to do something and you're trying to like hold this there, hold that there, and do this. And oh no, when you do that, my right leg does that automatically. And now I got to, and there's all this chaos,
Mhm.
right? So part of the art of teaching is helping people grow in their awareness, and then we slow things down and break it down so that we can then make sure that the energy that we're sharing with our horses through pressure, physical touch, intention, I mean, who knows what that can be, but that ends up being meaningful to them,
Mhm.
right? And it's the same thing. We meet somebody, there's obviously a ton of different types of people in the world, right? So one of the things, when I get tired, I get really quiet.
Mhm.
When I get angry, I get really quiet, right? So he might be walking around, or my wife might be walking around and say, "Are you mad at me?" Like they're trying to figure out, what does this
Yeah.
mean? What's this thing mean? And most of the time it means I'm just tired. And then we have other people that are, like I am now, just chatting and talking and do. And at some point, if you lose the meaning of it, of the communication, we just tune them out, right? And it's a real similar thing with us and our horses. And the only difference is we're the ones that want that relationship with the horse. So we have to take responsibility for ourselves in doing that. It's not the horse's fault in that sense, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. Do you see any relationship between awareness and anxiety for people? Because you just were explaining that teaching people to open that flow of communication requires taking in information and being aware of what they're doing and how. Do you see a correlation
Mhm.
between those two things?
Absolutely. Do you want to talk to that? Or...
No.
All right, well, call's
There's,
over.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks for having us.
um, so with all of these things, there's 15, 20 different ways to talk about them. But I think one important piece for all of us to understand, for us and our horses, is that what we pay attention to is what we experience.
Hmm.
It is
I
a
have
nature,
so
you
many
know, and
cool
there's a
phrases to steal after this call to sound smart. I'm gonna be the smartest lady walking around in 15 minutes.
So the challenge, you know, and this is true for our horses, right? Right? I do this all the time. I got this super anxious, high, you know, well, people would call him a squirrel. He's just worried about the whole world. And if we're in the indoor and he's
You gotta be
worried about
kinder
the,
to yourself about
huh?
it. You gotta be kinder to yourself about these things.
Right?
Horses are
If he's,
cool. They're actually very
if he, so if my horse Joey's worried about the door banging or something, if I just take the flag and create enough to catch his interest, even if I just catch an ear, then he's going to be able to go around because he's not paying attention to that thing, which is it's a really interesting way of playing with attention with your horses to notice what shifts as their attentional shifts. So anxious people, okay, what are they doing? They're attending to and focusing on an internal experience,
Hmm.
right? So one of the ways to help people, and this is a common way, you use distraction, right? If someone's really anxious, or if my, you know, if my stub my, you know, if I hit my hand with a hammer, my grandfather would come up and step on my toe and say, "Now your hand doesn't hurt," right?
Now I know all of your secrets of your school.
So if we offer distraction, that's one way to shift the focus. But the challenge with anxiety and attention and awareness, ah, nobody really knows. They're kind of the same, they're kind of different. There's lots of people have opinions about it. There's no definitive way to define it. We talk about it as narrow versus broad and about threshold to consciousness. So attention is a conscious activity. Awareness is opening up the attentional systems and lowering the threshold so that something can jump into our conscious awareness, right? So if you open,
I never heard you say that. That's
I
kind of cool.
I say that all the time.
When?
I just said it last weekend.
I
Yeah,
did. Were you paying
I must
attention?
not have
I
been,
just heard it.
I must not have been aware. Yeah.
I was paying attention.
Give you a
So,
sticker.
so one of the, if people are really anxious, they are not going to be able to be aware. So, in order to help from an instructor perspective, you want to do a couple of things. First of all, you want to bring down their level of activation. So they can be anxious. It's not like that you're going to take a profoundly anxious person and make him like, you know, cool as a cucumber. You're going to help them regulate though. And how do we do that? We engage them, right? That's, you know, one of my most effective strategies for helping people with anxiety is to engage them. And in the process of the banter back and forth, I make them laugh,
That's why
right?
I'm cool as a cucumber. Should have brought my shades.
And then when they're regulated, then you can help them broaden their awareness. And you can do that a couple of different ways. One of the ways that you can broaden awareness is think about awareness as connecting to your different systems or ways of knowing the world, right? We talked about the exchange of energy and information. Awareness involves being open to gathering information from what we see, gathering information from what we feel, gathering information from what we feel inside our body. So our what are there? How many senses are there now? They keep coming up with more. I think they say 8, right? The normal 5, and then we have interoception, exteroception, and proprioception, right? Yeah, what's inside of us, awareness of how we feel
He's
outside of
making
us,
that up.
and our sense of self in space, right? So,
Does make
you
him sound
know,
smart. I trust
You gotta be
him.
careful. Be careful with him because he'll just say those things.
So if with your clients, first of all, help them ground themselves, help them regulate, connect with them, lower the activation, and then say, okay, kind of let's look at what you see. And just something as simple as having them take a step back and look at their horse. And then you can direct their visual attention to meaningful things, right?
Mhm.
These are reading the signs, right? And as the horses, do they hard eye? Do they have is their mouth, clamped? Is their tail clamped? Is their tail swishing? Do they sitting with rear foot cocked? These, and then you could help them connect to what they feel. I maybe feel through a line, right? And how, what way are they taking hold of things? So getting them connected to those. And then once we connect them to those different senses, then it's really a practice to be in that place and just be open, right? More sort of we used to do one of the guys that Justin learned from attended a wilderness school, and he would talk about eagle eyes versus owl eyes, right? And owl eyes are this really broader uh, focus of attention. So if we can help our clients settle their anxiety and then broaden their sense just to be open, and then teach them more deliberately what things are meaningful, both in terms of what to receive and how to communicate with our horses, then we have a recipe for success. And just, kind of swing back to the beginning, you're absolutely, anxiety is going to interfere with awareness because
Mm,
it's going to absorb your awareness.
that's
That's all
really
you're going
neat.
to be able to see. Hmm.
I have a lot of notes to go out and now be a new teacher of this. Patented step by step. That's guaranteed. So actually, that brings me to my last question, which is the spiciest one. So it's kind of popular now to get into this pop psychology stuff, and for people in clinics. So let me back up. As a clinician myself, when I go teach somebody, I am going to have maybe a day, a weekend, an hour, depending on the format, and then I'm going to go home, right?
Right,
So I
right.
I tried to be very careful about what I open up because when I leave,
Perfect.
that can is
Yep.
open and I'm out of here,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I find it a little concerning to bring it. I don't go poking around in people's brains because I'm not qualified for one. And secondly, even if I was,
Hmm.
I'm going to go home. What do you guys see the potential risks or benefits with that kind of thing being brought up in a clinic by a clinician who is not like a qualified psychologist or something like that?
Well,
It's kind of popular, so delving into people's trauma and bringing it up and
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
getting into these very, very wobbly areas of vulnerability for people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Where do you see the risk or benefit of something like that in a weekend workshop or clinic with somebody that you can't develop a long-term relationship with?
Hmm.
The there's there's a reason that we're both sitting here right now, and there's a reason that we work together. Um, and 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 it started like we told our story. It started just very organically and accidentally, but there's so many there's so many things that I can touch on or walk into with somebody that it's like I mean, I haven't made it to college yet. Like I am just as I tell people all the time. It's a joke in the sense of that I care a lot about my horsemanship and I'm primarily, as long as I can pay the bills, primarily dedicated to my own education. But at the end of the day, I'm just a horse trainer. I'm just
Cold
just
starter.
a fucking cult
Just
starter,
a
as we
cold
say.
starter.
And it's just it's I like we talk and teach and hang out and so much that I feel like I get this window and I understand a lot more about human psychology than probably mo many people that are horse trainers and teaching, but it's still so far from appropriate for me to try to give guidance into that internal world for most people. It's one thing, it's like when you're building a relationship with them long term, and it's like somebody you're working with on a weekly basis or something like that at home. But even then, it's the boundaries on that relationship have to still be different. And I think it gets really tricky. I'll let him say his piece, but from my perspective, it gets really tricky in this industry when people who are not qualified are opening up some pretty uh sometimes volatile, so most of the time very complex things that are on the internal side of people's psychology, and it gets a little bit, it becomes, it's hard to see when folks are, maybe they come here for a clinic and so open them up to seeing their horse's trauma as a reflection of their own, and it's this whole narrative that it's like that's a hard thing to kind of try to unpack, especially when it's not being guided professionally.
Yeah.
That's my little rant. Do you have a little rant?
Do I ever have a little rant?
That's what I'm here for. I wanted it spicy. Give it to me
I think
spicy.
Amy has a rant.
Um, so I want to put this into context a couple of different ways. So first of all, if you're teaching a clinic, right? And in your intention, staying in your lane, teaching about riding, relationships with horses, horsemanship, whatever, right? And a client, and one of the clients has a strong emotional reaction for whatever reason, you're not opening that up.
Mhm.
You're just doing your stuff, and then they're having that reaction. Okay.
It happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it will, because horses are both such powerful. So if you go from a spiritual perspective, they're just powerful, energetic beings. And that pulls for all kinds of stuff. From a psychological perspective, they're these amazing projective objects that people project all kinds of their stuff onto. So in that way, it's like I think that I wouldn't want someone like a trainer to be beating themselves up because their client had an emotional reaction. If you're doing your job and in your lane, people will,
Mhm.
right? And then, then I think, like, when you see that, you say, is this now this new thing in my lane, or should I refer them to somebody and say, hey, this is a really strong reaction. I really respect that that's your experience. And, there are people that can help you sort through that. Not me, right? And you can send them along. So that's one context.
Mhm.
So we live in a world where there are all kinds of people who want to help or heal other people, or guide other people in their lives, or help them discover, or help them bloom, or I don't know what kind of language. I can't cast a blanket statement, but I will say that there's a huge percentage of those people who have, like, let's say, a coaching certificate, which took them 6 to 9 months, most of which was talking about the boundaries of coaching. Okay. They go out and they're all about connecting to this spiritual stuff or things of that sort. And they go into these places with people. Those places I think you're referring to. And kind of like the horse world, I don't know how you feel about this, but I've always had this idea. It's like there's a whole shit ton of sucky training and all stuff. And about 75-80% of horses just put up with all the bullshit
Mhm.
and they're fine. They're shut down, or they get injured because of the way they're being ridden or things like that. But basically they're do fine.
They fill in.
Right. They tolerate it. And then there's that, whatever, 20-25%. It's like, no way, boom, right? And now you have these problem horses, right? And they're not problem horses, they're problem people, right? But they're saying they're a problem horse because most of the horses they work with are just fine. So
Mhm.
this must be an aberration. Okay. Same thing happens with people. I spent years as a teacher, so I had time talking, learning about how they learn. I went through graduate school, 5 years of both book and clinical training. I've been sitting in a consultation room with people between 20 to 30 hours a week for the last 32 years. Um, so someone comes up and they help someone grow, and then they have this thing they don't know what to do with, and now they're uncovering it, and now you have a big mess, and the person's right, and the person's in a really, really bad way,
Mhm.
right, and they don't know what to do with that, right? Guess who gets called?
You,
Right.
boy.
Yeah, and it's so, and it's true about the sports psych world too. Like everyone's excited about all these mental skills things and how to do it, but what people don't realize is those mental skills things are not necessarily going to be helpful for people who are struggling with deeper challenges.
Yeah.
So they do the mental skills thing and then they get in trouble. I love your sensibility about, hey, I don't want to uncover all this stuff and send it home. That's the way, by the way, I used to do a lot of work with kids. And I would always think about that. I said, what home is this kid going back to?
Yeah.
Which is the same
Right?
idea for the horses.
It's the exact same idea. I'm not gonna uncover and excavate and dig and with this kid. I'm just gonna package him up real good so he can operate in that system at home. So I
Yeah,
think
that's
having that sensitivity is really, really important. And staying in your lane is really important. And knowing the limits, and being able to see how those limitations are expressed. I know when I'm out of my league with a horse.
yeah.
Justin,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I wish we had more dialogue among professionals, and I wish we were more open to building relationships. That's like I think in this industry, everybody who teaches riding or works with horses should um, have a psychologist or some type of experienced therapist who they can collaborate with and share clients with. And
Be so helpful because every
Mhm,
single person who teaches riding lessons is going to have the experience of saying, okay, turn left, and the person is crying, and you don't
mhm,
know why or what to do about it. And,
mhm,
like I said, I'm
right.
certified myself. It's not my area of expertise, but I
and
think
that, sorry.
that
No, no,
probably
no, I'm not
biggest
interrupting you.
struggles, probably one of our biggest struggles is that, everybody,
But
I have the rubber band. Okay? I have the rubber band of attention. I am the decider of who to give it to. No, just everybody has their shtick, right? Every one of us is
Right,
out here trying to make a living. It's
right,
kind of an arms race.
absolutely.
We all have our thing. And so I find that collaborating with each other, asking questions, it turns into like a defensive, like, well, I never have that problem because I understand the window to people's souls. I'm like, well, I friggin' don't, like I was
right,
looking for a little help and it turned into a one-upmanship. It's
Yeah,
it's
right.
not easy or always safe to collaborate with other professionals for that reason, because we come at it not as people trying to help the public, but as
Mhm, right,
individuals with a shtick that we're protecting.
right.
And I think that would be the most exciting thing for me, is to see. I've had a dream for a long time about a place that for anybody in working as a professional in the industry to be able to come together and just talk.
Yeah.
Um, how do you do that civilly? And if you run into those characters, that's tough. But
One of
I
these.
that's exactly it. Yeah. I have a theory though, and sure, I think there's lots of folks who just won't get along, but I think the majority of us get defensive at a distance. And there is this, to take this all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, there is power in the relationship, the act of being in relationship. So it's a lot easier to try to understand somebody's perspective when you're sitting down across from them than when
Yeah.
you're commenting on Facebook or
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. And I so that's kind of a dream of mine, is that we can find a way for us to all talk better. Um, and then back to totally different thing. Um, I'm all over the place. I'm pulling a Paul. Um, so the other thing that you said that I kind of spurred something was when your student's turning left and starts crying, there are ways that we help them. And that's why we built this course, is there, it's not that we have to ignore those emotions in our students because it's not our thing.
Right.
It's just, I think, really important that we have boundaries around
Yeah.
how far we go. And this idea, like with the horses, from the horse perspective, it's that same idea of, if there's a really shut down horse in front of me, and it's shut down because at home that's the way it protects, it survives. There's
It gets its
no
needs met.
good in bringing that horse out of that shell and then sending him home that way. There's
Yeah.
so we do have to honor some of those defensive mechanisms, unless we have a bigger role in changing that. And then that bigger role, see, I am connecting it all. Then that bigger role comes in,
That way. I don't remember.
then that bigger then that bigger oh that yeah then that bigger role is in that we all talk and build bridges, is an idea that we what is that from? What book was that? Change.
Change.
Who wrote that book?
Damon, somebody or other. How Big Things Happen, I think this is called.
Okay.
Damon something or other wrote a
Damon
really good book, and
Santola?
that sounds kind of right. We'll
It's kind of
fact
right.
check.
His name is kind of Damon Santola.
Something or other.
Something or other. But there's this idea that real change, wide change, big change comes from connections, building. He talks about building bridges,
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of little bridges to build a wide bridge, and then it takes a lot of wide bridges through different communities before you see this big change happen that we see on the surface. And that's something that I think is really necessary for the survival of our industry as well,
Right.
is that we start to talk, and we share ideas, and we get, and it's like, get down off your high horse and have a conversation and try to see somebody else's perspective. I think that really bugs me when folks won't take a second to hear somebody else,
Yeah.
which I have done so many stupid things in my life so far, that if I think my perspective is the only way, knowing that I've changed perspectives several thousand times, that's pretty silly too. So I
Tried
think
to
it's
specify it so far to give room for more stupid things to come. Like,
absolutely. I mean, it's in my schedule for later today to go try a stupid thing. So,
yeah, my schedule. Do stupid thing.
perfect.
12.
Perfect. Perfect. But no, I think there's so much in the industry about, it's like, we find a new idea and then that's the end all be all and that's the right way, so everything else is wrong. But there's an evolution.
Yeah.
And I set aside a long time ago this idea that my way is right and somebody else's is wrong. And I will try very hard, even if it's something that seems, I try to draw a line at abuse and anything underneath that, if somebody's doing something different, I will try very hard to understand it because I find that there's so much value in that.
Yeah.
Without being able to talk to somebody else to build a bridge and have a conversation, well, the only way to do that is to have some understanding of their perspective. And then we have to have that conversation. But
That's
we seem to
very
get so
lacking right
full.
now in our climate now, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Worldwide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that unfortunately I have to wrap this call up, but that's the perfect thing to wrap it up on is to start developing perspective and engage with each other and stuff. 'Cause like you said, if we're really going to help the public base, we have to be able to connect with each other and share resources and stuff. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
I really,
support each other.
really appreciate your guys' insight and time. I want to do another one because I have way more things that I'd like to talk about. But I have to do a
We
lot of
would.
stupid things today. So I have
Perfect. Me too.
thank you
No,
guys
thank you for
so
having
much.
us on, Amy. We really
It was a lot of
appreciate
fun.
it.
I'll think of some more spicy questions and I'll have to take lessons from you, Paul, on how to answer spicy questions thoughtfully and not just blurt out everything I think as fast as possible.
The word
That
is
was
being
impressive.
diplomatic, and I don't know how to do that yet. So
Yeah, I think part of it is probably like slowing down, maybe thinking before you speak. That seems like something that
That
practice.
does help sometimes.
Thank you guys so much. It was so much fun.
It was a delight. Thanks for having us on.
It was nice to meet you. Nice to see you again, Justin.
Likewise, take care.
Bye.